It begins with silence, a prairie evening, August of 1812, when mothers in Pike County noticed their children were not returning home, 6 gone in a single week. The woods were scoured, the river searched, but there were no tracks, no screams, no bodies. Families whispered of wolves, of bandits, of Shawnee raids. Yet there were no claw marks, no camps, no scalps, just emptiness. The town preacher said it was punishment for sin. The sheriff said it was fear playing tricks. And then came the first letter, nailed to the church door in jagged handwriting. We teach them what you cannot. A schoolhouse had recently been built just beyond the tree line, 3 miles from town. A family from Kentucky, the Grahams, had arrived the year before. Husband, wife, 2 sons, 1 daughter. They said they were educators. Their school promised discipline, structure, moral purity. Parents desperate for literacy sent their children willingly. The Graham family lived beside the school in a sprawling timber house with a barn and cellar that locals were never invited into. The first students praised the Grahams' generosity. But those children slowly disappear, excused with vague explanations. Sickness, sudden departure, sent to relatives out east. No parent ever received a letter. This was a frontier where records were scarce, where disappearance could be explained away with a shrug. Yet unease settled like frost. Mothers reported hearing a faint clanging echoing at night from the schoolhouse, like iron striking stone. Hunters claimed they saw children wandering the woods barefoot, dazed, eyes unfocused, before vanishing into the trees. And every Sunday the Grahams appeared at church dressed in impeccable black, smiling politely, leaving just as the final hymn began. When the sheriff asked to examine the premises, the Grahams reminded him that theirs was a private institution, protected by law. The matter was dropped. According to their few surviving pamphlets, the Grahams believed modern society weakened children. They argued discipline required purification through suffering. Learning, they claimed, was most effective when the student feared every mistake as though it were a sin. Rumors spread that they used the rod with a brutality unseen even in frontier schools. Some said children returned home with bruises, welts, burns on their hands. Others said their voices changed, monotone, mechanical, void of childhood. The Grahams wrote to parents insisting this was the sign of progress. And strangely, parents accepted it because the alternative was ignorance. In November 1813, a boy stumbled into town barefoot and frostbeaten, muttering incoherently. His name was Thomas Bell, age 11, missing for nearly 6 months. His back bore scars in precise cross-hatched patterns carved like letters. His fingernails had been removed and replaced with sharpened bone splinters. When questioned, he repeated only one phrase, "Lessons are forever, lessons are forever." The town physician declared him insane. He was taken to a poorhouse in St. Louis where he died weeks later. The sheriff urged the community not to spread wild tales. But whispers grew louder. The Grahams were no educators. They were something else entirely. By 1814, Pike County was shrinking. Families fled west. The soil was fertile, but the air was heavy with unease. Yet no one confronted the Grahams directly. Why? Some say it was fear of reprisal. Others claim the Grahams held influence. Secret correspondence with county judges, militia leaders, and even pastors. Their school received donations from unknown benefactors in Chicago. It was said the Grahams' black, glad wagons often departed at night, transporting crates that clinked and rattled, vanishing down roads with no destination. Each time someone questioned them, their farms mysteriously caught fire, their cattle died overnight. Silence was safer. The most disturbing reports came from hunters camping near the school. They swore they heard children singing in unison long after midnight. Not lullabies, but guttural chants, rhythmic and inhuman. Witnesses described voices like mouths full of ash. Once, a farmer's wife claimed she saw 30 pale faces in the upstairs window of the schoolhouse, eyes unblinking, staring out into the moonlight as if waiting for someone. But when she screamed, the faces blinked out instantly as though they'd never been there. When she told the sheriff, he dismissed it as female hysteria. The Grahams remained untouchable. Among the strangest artifacts tied to the Grahams is mention of a bell. Former students, what few survived, spoke of a red, painted iron bell suspended in the classroom. Each morning, the Grahams struck it before lessons began. Children said the sound made them dizzy, nauseous, compliant. Some claimed the bell summoned the shadows in the floorboards, things that slithered and whispered from beneath. No one in town ever saw this bell, and when the school burned decades later, no trace was found. Yet letters preserved in private collections confirm its existence. One reads simply, "Ring the bell and the children obey." In the winter of 1815, crops failed, rivers froze, and the town faced famine. Yet the Grahams' livestock thrived, their pantries full, their children plump. Townsfolk began to wonder where this food came from. Then one January morning, a farmer tracked bloody footprints across the snow leading from his empty smokehouse to the Graham property. He confronted them, and within a week his body was found floating in the Mississippi, his eyes and tongue removed. The official verdict, drowning, but locals whispered the Grahams had shown the town what happened to those who asked questions. Reverend Isaac Whitmore, pastor of the county church, kept a diary. In 1816, he recorded confessions from parents who admitted they suspected the Grahams, yet still sent their children there. Why? Because the Grahams promised a place in eternity for obedient families. Some parents believed the Grahams' cruelty was godly, that their punishments cleansed the soul. Whitmore himself began to fear he was preaching to a congregation slowly being converted, not to Christianity, but to some parallel doctrine hidden inside the Graham home. His final entry reads, "I fear I am shepherd to a flock already claimed by another master." By 1817, travelers spoke of a smell rising from the Graham farm, sweet, metallic, rotting. When a band of soldiers passed through on patrol, they demanded entry. The Grahams reluctantly allowed them into the house, but barred the cellar door. Witnesses claimed the soldiers descended anyway, only to stumble back moments later, pale and vomiting, refusing to speak of what they saw. That night the schoolhouse was locked, the Grahams' wagons departed, and by dawn the soldiers were gone from town. Records show they never returned to their garrison, as if erased. Whatever lay beneath that school was left sealed. In 1819, Pike County awoke to flames. The Graham schoolhouse was engulfed, the house too. Townsfolk gathered, but no one tried to save it. Some swore they heard screams, not of adults, but of dozens of children, shrieking inside the blaze, though no children were supposed to be enrolled that season. When the fire subsided, no bodies were found, not the Grahams, not their students. Nothing but charred wood and scorched stone. The cellar door remained intact, blackened but unbroken. For years afterward, travelers avoided the site. And still, children kept vanishing from surrounding counties. The state declared the Grahams dead. Their land was seized, yet no one purchased it. By 1821, grass overtook the ruins. The story faded, replaced by newer wars, fresher tragedies. But every few decades, locals reported the same phenomena. Strange songs in the night, barefoot children wandering the woods, and the sound of a bell faintly ringing across the prairie. Families buried their memories, choosing silence over madness. The missing were never counted, the Grahams never spoken of again. Official history moved on. The land itself seemed to conspire to forget. In 1898, construction workers digging foundations for a railway near the site unearthed a rusted lockbox. Inside were letters, lesson plans, and sketches. They described curricula that included starvation, isolation, and ritual sacrifice disguised as tests of learning. One note read, "When the mind is emptied, the vessel is ready." Another contained crude drawings of children bound in iron restraints, with instructions on how to reshape bones so the body learns obedience. The box was quietly taken by county officials, then disappeared. Today, its contents exist only in a few faded copies circulating among collectors of forbidden lore. Modern scholars who have studied the Graham case argue the family was less concerned with literacy than with breaking the will of children. They sought to erase individuality, to turn human beings into instruments of obedience. Psychologists describe this as total institution conditioning, a precursor to methods later perfected in asylums, orphanages, even prisons. The Grahams were not merely sadists, they were experimenters. They believed suffering unlocked something ancient in the human mind, a pliability that could be molded. Whether this knowledge came from their own invention, or something darker whispered through that red bell, remains unanswered. What became of the missing children? Oral histories collected in the 1930s suggest they were not killed, but transformed. Farmers told of encountering groups of pale, silent adolescents decades after the fire, wandering the woods, faces expressionless. Some were said to knock on doors, asking for lessons, their voices flat, rehearsed like recited lines. These children never aged, never lingered, always vanished when pursued. To this day, locals in Pike County warn against answering a knock at night if a child's voice is heard. For it may not be a child at all, but one of the Graham's pupils, still learning, still waiting. Why did no authority intervene? Some claim the Grahams had patrons in high places, men who benefited from their research. Others insist the family were merely one cell in a broader network of frontier cults, experimenting on human minds. The Midwest, after all, was littered with religious sects, utopian communes, and secret societies. Perhaps the Grahams were simply the most extreme, or perhaps they tapped into something truly ancient, ritual practices carried from Europe, buried in Protestant sermons, disguised as schooling. What remains certain is this: their crimes were never punished. Their legacy seeped into institutions that followed. By the late 19th century, similar teaching methods emerged in orphanages and industrial schools across America. Starvation as discipline, isolation as correction, pain as education. Though officially unconnected, the echoes are undeniable. The Grahams may have burned, but their philosophy spread like rot. Each lash of the rod, each locked cell in the name of moral instruction, carries their shadow. Some historians argue the American system of correction itself was born from that Illinois prairie, forged in a schoolhouse of screams, and every child who suffered within those walls was, in some way, a descendant of the Grahams' experiment. Today, Pike County avoids the topic. Old maps omit the site, and elders steer children away from the woods where the school once stood. Yet occult researchers continue to visit, claiming the land itself hums at night. Some say they've found fragments of iron bells half buried in the soil. Others claim to hear faint lessons being recited in unison, voices rising from the earth itself. Whether legend or memory, the warning remains: the Grahams' experiment did not die with fire. It seeped into the ground, into the culture, into the way America treats its forgotten children. The story of the Graham family is not just a tale of murder. It is a parable of silence, of parents who looked away, of authorities who colluded, of children erased from history. Their school was a frontier horror, but it was also a mirror, reflecting the darkness that hides behind institutions we trust. The Grahams taught a single lesson, one that echoes long after their fire: that obedience once carved into flesh never fades. And perhaps the most terrifying part is this: if you listen closely on certain nights in Illinois, you may still hear the faint toll of a red bell calling children to class.